So I'm going to start with the little stuff and then get to the big stuff. The littler stuff is the California stuff. When I say little, I mean just sort of some smaller things, like the fact that Donald Trump has brought in Devin Nunes, I think, to be part of his administration. He's also tapped another Californian, I think, to be a part of his administration. So a lot of these people who were loyal to Trump and also had positions in Congress from California, they're now going to be part of this new administration.
Yeah. Well, look, Devin Nunes, people, have to go into all the nitty-gritty details of it, but he was the guy that Trump tapped to basically launch Truth Social. I mean, that was his raison d'etre when he left Congress, all right? But here's the deal. From just a raw political standpoint, okay, given the, so say, love lost between, the esteemed governor of California and our esteemed president-elect, it doesn't hurt to have a couple of allies with some California roots because, listen, there's no doubt about the fact that it's the most populous state in the nation, with a bullet train down the center of the state that's going to need some serious federal funding if it ever has a chance of being completed, with fires and all kinds of other things you're going to need federal funding. You want to have some allies. You know what I mean? You definitely want to have some allies. Now, Kevin McCarthy was a big one when he was Speaker of the House. He's not that anymore, but he's still a major player. But you got to have some. You got to have some people in the homeland, Mark, who know the back channels to the Oval.
You see them as allies, though. It's interesting, Gary. You don't see them. So you see them as potentially, anyway, people who might blunt any kind of vengeful, reflexive thing that Trump might do to California because he doesn't like Newsom or he doesn't like a blue state.
Yeah. Well, it just never hurts. Look, some of these people post-Trump, right? I mean, Nunes isn't an old guy. He may see himself with a political future in California. Therefore, right, part of his agenda when he's working, whatever he's going to end up, I mean, we don't need to get into the details of his position they're proposing, but bottom line is you want to have some people with some skin in the game, right, who can kind of advocate for your state and say, listen, don't just get a chainsaw at the Nevada border or just cut the thing off and let it drift off into the Pacific, metaphorically speaking, right? So, yes, I'm saying those kind of allies can be helpful.
The other thing that we're realizing, I was always aware of this, and again, these are my opinion, not yours. I mean, I was certainly aware that Donald Trump couldn't do anything really about inflation. In fact, inflation wasn't all that awful, even as he was talking about it's the worst inflation ever. And then you and I have both lived through worse inflation, But I get it. It was the stump, and you were saying whatever you could to get to the finish line when you were Donald Trump. And now Gary Cohn, who ran his economy the first time, when Trump was the president the first 4 years, he was on Face the Nation, and he was talking about the economy in general and the ending inflation call. Tony, do you have that? The Face the Nation? Didn't mean to. Somebody wake Tony, please. And but there are two things. First of all, of course, Trump's promises to clean up the American economy, and then the realities. And it's interesting that he has, Trump now, sort of begun to walk back. I'm going to, take care of the economy in an afternoon type thing. He's saying there's really not much I can do. It's hard to bring things down once they're up, is what he says. But here is Gary Cohn, as I say, who ran Trump's economy during the first administration, and he was just on yesterday, Face the Nation.
So what does that mean in terms of the economy President Trump will be inheriting?
So the president's inheriting a very good economy, a very stable economy. We have real solid economic growth.
Stop right there. So this isn't the worst economy ever, because the president that you're talking about, Trump, was saying it was the worst economy ever. But you're saying actually it's a very good economy with great stable growth. There is a lot of momentum. That's good momentum for Trump to inherit with this economy. You've been in this business a long time, and now you've been around Trump long enough to kind of hear his proclamations, the things he says to get elected, the things he says once he's in office. He plays to the room. What do you think he'll really do? I know there's no way to really handicap it, but do you really think he's going to mess with an economy that's essentially in pretty good shape?
Yeah, I don't think, I think to say he's going to mess with the economy would be way overstating it, Mark. I think what we're going to see a lot of, I think initially, he keeps talking about this. And by the way, he had a press conference at big chunk of. And I think we're going to see a somewhat measured response, but he's going to go after some of the things that, are kind of the bright, shiny objects, i.e. tariffs, right? I don't have any doubt that he is going to, in his first week or two in office, say, look, China, look, Xi Jinping, I told you, here they come, right? And he's going to probably say the same thing if he doesn't work out some kind of a deal between now and then, to some degree, to people like, Mexico, Canada, to a far lesser degree. But I think he wants to make a statement early on. Look, don't mess with us and don't mess with me. I think that's going to be a lot of it. And then he's going to see where the numbers start playing out. If the Fed decides they're going to go ahead and drop interest rates, that everybody thinks they may well do at their next meeting, that's another good sign for him, right? So I think he knows enough not to throw a wrench in the spokes, but also I think it's going to be flexing, his muscle. One of his big initiatives, I think, that you're going to see get some flesh on the bones. Part of it is the tariffs. Part of it is this incentive. Listen, we won't jack up your corporate tax rate if you invest $1 billion here, in the United States. I think you're going to see a lot of this bring the jobs home kind of stuff, because that really plays well with the people that decided this time around they were going to vote for him, namely union workers.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We've talked about it before, and we'll talk about it again, the way the Democrats seem to have lost a lot of the working class vote, and union workers among them. Although, I mean, not as a complete group of people, but just definitely some erosion there. And so, even while Democrats are doing some soul searching, you're so right to point to the fact that I guess Trump would play to that group that is now sort of newly on board in a big way with his MAGA nation. You talk also about capitulating, or to, the strength that Trump approaches with, do this or else type thing. I saw this ABC settlement and was astounded by it. Again, ABC settling for $15 million on a case that by all legal yardsticks, they were going to win if it went to court. ABC was going to win. So before it even got to court, they agreed to pay $1 million in legal fees to Donald Trump to offset his legal fees, and then pay, was it $15 million to his library, Donald Trump Institute, or whatever it's calling. It was clearly, it's a payment to, one way or another, to him and the Trump organization. Can you speak to what's happened to the media in relation to that relationship that they have essentially with the chief executive, or a coming chief executive that they feel might give them trouble? Yeah,
well, there's winning and then there's winning. Okay, so let's separate out the winning from the winning, and I'm not trying to be Charlie Sheen about this. Okay, I mean here's the deal. Could ABC and George Stephanopoulos have drugged us through the courts and had a big protracted back and forth about this? Yes, they could have. Is that going to help them in their coverage? That is for the network and for George. Is that going to help them in the next 4 years? Absolutely not, right? So you look at the bigger picture and you say, look, do you want to be the poster child that Trump and his people are going to call out every time we have a presser, whatever it is, right? The answer to that is no. I mean, the major networks and the major cable networks outside of Fox, I mean, I even heard this in newsrooms. They're scrambling to figure out how are we going to relate to Trump version 2, all right? And there's a certain amount of that you have to have access to, and you don't want to just be simply at odds with the president. So that's part of it. I think the other part of it, Mark, is that the audience, right? I mean, the people did vote. They did vote Trump in, like it or not, for a lot of people. And the numbers, for example, of Fox vis-a-vis CNN, vis-a-vis MSNBC, are telling a really interesting story, which is people are not tuning in to some of the quote-unquote anti-Trump voices as much. And I think there's real concern amongst a lot of the folks in the news business. They may just lose giant chunks of audience share if they don't find a way to at least come to some common ground with this new administration.
That's fascinating and provocative, because the press has always been a key to the information that we have in a free society, and democracies and democratic republics need that information. upon which to base decisions about voting and about their leadership. And so what you're suggesting here, and I think appropriately, given what we've just seen, is that the relationship between that press that I've just referred to and the next 4 years of government is going to change radically. And we saw a little bit of it with Bezos scotching the endorsement that the Washington Post was going to make on the presidency, and LA Times did the same thing. And in a way, you kind of see that yardstick. First of all, those endorsements, as we've discussed, just don't mean what they used to. But secondly, and this is more provocatively, what you're saying is, hey, these guys have to do a new kind of calculus, and it's related to their survival.
Well, I think that's right, Mark. And look, you know this really well. You've been in this business a long time. Doesn't matter whether it's on the entertainment side or the news side. I mean, if you don't have eyeballs, be it on your newspaper, your digital platform, your TV, you're not going to survive. I mean, people sometimes forget that these are for-profit enterprises. You know, some would even claim that the amount of money that they raise in all kinds of various ways, even NPR has a certain, at least, survival motive financially. So, you know, I think sometimes people say, well, First Amendment, this and that. Yeah, but, you know, First Amendment applies depending on where you sit. And let's also remind ourselves of something else. There has never been a giant, warm, fuzzy relationship between those who hold the Oval Office and the Fourth Estate, the press. It's just, you know, Nixon was famously anti-press, but, you know, even the Clintons, of course, complained about it a lot. Even the Obamas did to some degree. You know, the Bushes did. I mean, you know, even the Biden team has said, you know, that they're even now saying we're not getting a fair shake. The Harris team said the same thing. So, you know, this has never been a warm, fuzzy relationship. I think importantly what we want, and I know you know this, Mark, but importantly what we want is a proper accountability mechanism that both has access to those in power and holds them to account.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I see so many of these institutions, communications institutions. I mean, again, ABC is part of a huge conglomerate. You know, you can pull ABC out. You still have a massive company, you know, with Disney and ESPN, and you know these are, you know, with theme parks and all the rest. So there's a lot at stake here. And I'm sure if you're Bob Iger, who runs ABC, it's like, cut the guy a $15 million check. Let's get done with this. I don't need the president breathing down my ass for 4 years. You know what I mean? They've got a lot of other stuff, as you say, and what that portends for the rest of society, essentially. I mean, I'm talking about commercial society, business society. As you see them, you know, on waiting lists to go meet with him at Mar-a-Lago, you see how completely ready they are to do whatever they have to stay in the good graces of the leader. I don't know, Gary, that we've had that kind of relationship, the one that you're talking about. You know, there's always been an adversarial relationship. That was just on the news side, on the media side. You're right. Obama complained about the press. Doesn't matter. But now we see leaders in other spheres. I'm talking about, you know, people in economic leadership. They may be oil companies or energy CEOs. They may be communications heads. They may be heads of auto companies. They're trying to lobby to the president-elect in this case, personally, as they go to Mar-a-Lago. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, not during a transition period. You know, it's not uncommon for major interest groups of any kind to try to curry the favor of the newly elected president. You know, you know, more democratically oriented administrations, you'll see labor unions, you know, get real close to that person who's now elected office because they want some things that they think are really important for their members, right? So this is not uncommon. What is uncommon and has really been shocking to people is the rapidity of the process, the expedited nature of it, and the high profile. So, for example, his somewhat impromptu press conference this morning at Mar-a-Lago, I'll guarantee you, is going to get way more attention than anything that's going to happen in Washington today, right? And that's what Trump has been able to, some would say, exploit. Some would say that's what he came in with. People call him a showman. I think you've used that term sometimes, Mark. I mean, he knows how to use the public airwaves and now digital media, apparently from his campaign, to great effect. And that is, I think, something that is really maybe indeed a new reality.
Look, he understands something else, and that is that if you say something enough, it gets through, and you can say, believe it, not believe it, whatever. I mean, I just gave you the example of the economy, calling it the worst economy in history. We've never had inflation like this. I mean, he just said it over and over and over again. And people, because there is this sense of, I don't feel good, I don't have a boat in my driveway or whatever, and to be fair, most Americans have continued to live on the precipice, right? Which is, we can't take a $1,000 hit unexpectedly without it throwing us into a real economic tailspin. So in a sense, he's speaking a language that all of us understand. It lands for all of us. But wow, to see so many leaders of industry, as we used to call them, meet with him and kiss the ring, it's a remarkable thing. And it's scary for me, I think, for the future, because it seems to me that a lot of these people who are the advice and consent people, the Senate, supposed to be handling these confirmations, they're intimidated. The same way these leaders of industry are intimidated. What did they do with Joni Ernst, Gary? They essentially made it clear, hey, you're going to vote for Pete Hegseth or for DOD head, or we're going to primary you, and we are going to pillory you until you'll be sorry that you ever came to Washington. This is a far... again, this is when I turn to you because you know so much about Washington. It seems like a far more intense and forward way to twist arms than I've seen in the past.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, the name that came into my mind, and for some of our younger demographic, they're going to go, who is this guy? LBJ, okay? When Lyndon Baines Johnson, Senator of Texas, was selected as vice presidential candidate to run with John Kennedy, he was famous for bare knuckle politics in that building in Washington. And that's the kind of guy, in some ways, that I think about with Trump. Reportedly, it didn't take long, like a 2-minute phone call, explicative lace from the president, that is LBJ when he took over, to some members of his former House and the Senate, saying, you either have to get in line here or we're going to take you down politically, right? I mean, that was sort of his MO. And, there was a lot of governing by fear, apparently in that LBJ administration because of that. So I don't know. I mean, are we back to some of those days? Maybe. But I think the interesting thing is, of course, that, from a sheerly practical standpoint, in less than 4 years, Donald Trump is gone, right? And so there's a lot of people, I think, what's interesting to me now, Mark, is trying to figure out not only the Trump era, but the post-Trump era. And so yesterday, for example, you had Mitt Romney, on one of the Sunday shows talking about this kind of thing. Well, listen, you got what you voted for in Trump. If he's saying stuff you didn't like, it's the same stuff he was saying on the campaign trail. So, hello. But there's already people, including him, saying, but the question comes, what happens after Trump? And I think there's a lot of calculations going on both in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party about this. One other thing, Mark, watch some of these interesting players that you would never have thought have anything in common with a Trump administration, like AOC, like Bernie Sanders. All of a sudden, Bernie says, the president's talking about the minimum wage is too low. I agree with him about that. AOC saying, hey, you know what? Elon and Vivek are saying we need to do this audit of the Pentagon that never seems to be done properly. I'm totally with them on that. So watch for some strange political bedfellows in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it would be wild if this shakeup included some things that might be some legit positives. So appreciate your take on these things. Sometimes you talk me off the ledge because you remind me of LBJ or, look, this isn't the first time Washington's been through some tumultuous times. I do think and feel as though there's some challenges here that are unique to this situation at this moment. But I look forward to exploring those more with you in the weeks to come. So is this our last time together before Christmas and the end of the year? I forget. I thought Kim was saying something, right? This is it, right?
Yeah, because I traditionally try and haven't, God help us, 2024, I really need this. I try to take the week of Christmas and between Christmas and New Year's off. So actually, it'll be for about 8 or 10 days. I'm going to go dark on the media side. And, absent some real crazy crisis and just take a deep breath And then on January 2nd, all you know what's going to break loose again in Sacramento and Washington.
Well, let's give you some Christmas jingle bells, kind of, yeah. We've loved you all year long, and you've been so great to hang with us. Thanks a lot. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you next year. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Bye, Gary. And I should mention, Gary is brought to you each week on this show by a very generous sponsor, Bill Campbell at RE/MAX Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, a lot of Northern California listeners and viewers, you will need a highly respected real estate professional, and Bill Campbell is that highly respected real estate professional. Get in touch with Bill Campbell at RE/MAX Gold. Call or text him 530-448-7474. 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell of RE/MAX Gold. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.